Good evening, guys. I'm Chief Meteorologist Scott Roberts alongside Griffin Hardy, who's joining us from our Next Star Nation Jackson affiliate for us, helping us out for the next couple of days because we have some pretty rough weather coming at us over the next few days here, next couple of days, starting tomorrow for us here in the Wiregrass, as now Major Hurricane Michael is going to be making landfall just to our south. Panama City is going to be in the crosshairs of this very strong storm coming in, and we do have a pretty good chance of feeling the effects right here in the Wiregrass with hurricane force winds sustained for us for possibly several hours through the day tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big problem with the storm, is it's not going to go away very quickly. It'll be one of those things that's very prolonged throughout the day tomorrow. And I'm really thinking that the tropical storm force winds should start to come in right at around lunchtime tomorrow. And from then until about midnight, conditions will be less than favorable, to say the least. I think likely we'll see hurricane force winds mainly in the evening. Yeah,
evening starting late in the maybe late afternoon, and it all depends on where it actually makes landfall. If we can bring up the graphics right now, we'll show you what we are talking about with Hurricane Michael as it does make its way on shore, strengthening. It's looking pretty good on satellite. We were looking at another source with the cloud tops, and these are very high, indicating that they're tall thunderstorms, healthy thunderstorms around the center of that storm. The eye not as well defined right now, but what we are seeing is possibly even a strengthening storm with that. I wouldn't be surprised if this was getting close to a Category 4 as it was making landfall.
And it's still got a lot of ocean to cover before it makes landfall. So there's plenty of room for this storm to continue strengthening before it does eventually make landfall, likely tomorrow morning near Panama City Beach. And Panama City Beach looks to kind of be the bullseye, so to speak, where the storm is likely going to head. And for folks that are on the right-hand side of where the storm's center will make landfall, that's where all the storm surge is going to be. Here's a graphic showing how large the wind field is. That tropical storm force wind field is no slouch. That's another thing you have to consider, is not just the category of the storm, but how large it is. And that was a problem that we ran into with Florence, is even though Florence was weakening as it came close to land, it was still a very large storm. I mean, the tropical storm force wind field was close to 200 miles wide.
Right, and then with the situation there, with that large wind field, you had a large storm.
Right.
Lots of heavy rain with it. That's what was very problematic in the Carolinas as far as dumping very heavy amounts of rain, upwards of several feet for many locations. Certainly, we are not going to be dealing with that type of situation here, because this storm does have a pretty decent amount of forward speed with it. Here is the advisory as of 5 o'clock Eastern Time, 4 o'clock Central Time. 120 mile per hour sustained winds, still moving northward at 12. No change there. There also hasn't been any change really as far as the forecast path with this. The pressure has been dropping. That is always a sign of a strengthening storm, and sometimes the winds do kind of lag behind that pressure drop as far as when they really do start to strengthen just a bit. 295 miles right now south of Panama City, Florida, and there's the path. There we go. Most of the Wiregrass on the left side of the track, as Griffin was talking about. That helps us out as far as the tornadic threat from this storm, but as far as the winds, this is pretty much too close for comfort for us, because we are going to be dealing with those hurricane force winds here in the area.
Yep, and when we say hurricane force wind, we're saying ballpark about 65 to 75 miles per hour. Technically speaking, hurricane force is anything above 74 miles per hour, and it's certainly possible that we have gusts that are that strong. And when it comes to those winds, it really doesn't matter what side of the storm you're on, because likely we're going to be seeing those winds on both sides. Of course, the tornado threat is typically confined to the right front quadrant of the storm, and I really think, along with the Storm Prediction Center, they think that highest tornado threat is going to be along the I-10 corridor going from Tallahassee all the way over to Jacksonville. That's where a lot of the winds are going to be out of the south, as opposed to the northeast, closer to
which is what we'll be dealing with here, which will still be very strong. I see on our live stream, Amanda asking, does Dothan need to evacuate? Even though we will be dealing with the hurricane force winds here, if you are in a sturdy structure, a well-built house, you're going to be okay. You're just going to need to stay away, just like with a tornado situation or a severe weather situation. Stay indoors, stay away from those windows and doors, and don't go out until the storm does pass, until we almost give the all clear.
just important to use your common sense, like Scott's talking about. Just make sure you're not out driving. That's where a lot of weather fatalities typically happen, is on the roadways. Usually what happens is people are out driving when they shouldn't be, and they see standing water on the roads, and it ends up being a lot deeper than what they actually see. And in reality, it only takes about 2 feet of water to float a vehicle, which is really not all that much. So just don't go out driving if you can help it during the afternoon and the evening tomorrow, because of course the winds will be kicking and we'll have a lot of flooding.
Right, and when that's happening, there's nowhere you need to be unless there's a really dire emergency, something medical or something along those lines.
And this far inland, evacuating is probably not necessary.
Right, because we don't have the storm surge threat that they will be dealing with. That's one of the main reasons why coastal communities do evacuate. You do have the wind threat as at the coast, as with any other landfalling system, but when you're at the coast, you have that storm surge, which could be upwards of 20 to 30 feet. Hurricane Katrina, which made landfall in southern Mississippi, was a Category 3 back in 2005 when it did make landfall, but it had the storm surge of a Category 5 storm because it was a Category 5 earlier. Thankfully, this storm isn't as strong, but sometimes Category doesn't always tell you exactly how much storm surge you're going to get. So that's the main reason for coastal communities to come inland. And Dothan generally is the place where people do come to evacuate. We've seen a lot of hotels filling up all across the region, and gas stations starting to have some issues with gas. Overall things are okay, just that sporadic. We've had some reports of things last night as far as running low on that gasoline. I see a question about Slocum. How high? Geneva County is included in that hurricane warning, so there's a pretty safe bet that you will be dealing with those winds in excess of 74 miles per hour through the day tomorrow. So definitely be prepared for that, and be prepared for those rough conditions in the afternoon hours and into the evening, and also be prepared for losing power. And I also see another question about apartments, second floor should be okay. Now, that's not necessarily ideal to be on the highest floor of a house in a situation like this or at a building like that, and it also depends on the type of material that the building is built out of. If it's more of a wooden structure, maybe not ideal.
It kind of depends on the hazard you're dealing with. Obviously, if it's flooding, you want to get to the top floor, but with a primarily wind event like this, you probably want to get to the lowest floor. Because, the closer you are to the ground, obviously, the slower the winds are going to be. In
a situation like this with the prolonged winds coming up over the roof, lifting up on parts of the eaves and stuff like that, you can run the risk of parts of the roof getting torn off with those very strong winds. So that will not only let in the wind possibly, but it will also let in the water and cause some issues that way, and general debris as well.
And I guess one thing to go over is just typical advice on how to prepare, because there is still plenty of lead time for the storm. I guess we're within maybe about 24 hours of this potential event, really, with things really starting to go downhill. So the best thing to do for now is, if you live in a mobile home,
let's go to the weather computer right now, full Garvin, if you can. There we go. There's some advice that we were able to compile.
So if you're in a mobile home, it's probably not a bad idea to find your local shelter, and I believe we have a list of those available on our website. Is that correct, on WDHN's website?
Yeah, dothanfirst.com.
Okay. All right. So we have a list of those shelters that are available near you, and it's almost inevitable that the power will go out near you. And in that situation,
it's not if, it is going to be when it goes out.
Yes, it is. The power will essentially go out for nearly all of us, and in that situation it's important to keep your phone charged, because you'll need a way to get warnings. Obviously, if a flash flood warning or a tornado warning is issued, you're not going to be able to watch television in order to get that warning. So the best way to do that is to follow us on social media. We'll have all those warnings posted there. And if you, of course, we talked about this, if you can help it, just avoid driving during the day, tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening. We'll likely see the tropical storm force winds start to come in after lunchtime. maybe those hurricane force winds coming in after 5 p.m. lasting until maybe 8 or 9 p.m.
Right.
And then the storm begins to exit the region after 9 p.m. And then by midnight, things should be starting to subside.
Yeah, but still, we are going to be dealing with some very breezy conditions on Thursday and even into Friday. We'll still have some residual winds with that. And I want to go back to what you said about the driving, staying off the roadways. Not only during the storm is it a concern, but because we are expecting upwards of maybe a foot of rain for some locations. We will have flash flooding, and you never know, as you said before, how deep that water is, and it doesn't take much for a vehicle to float away. So remember to turn around and don't drown. Going back to our questions, Abbeville, question about Abbeville. Abbeville is in part of the area that is actually covered by a tropical storm warning. We're going to pull that graphic up so that we can get an idea of where the greatest threats are for the area. The counties on our map on the weather computer Max 1 for us, highlighted in red, are actually the ones that are included in that hurricane warning. Basically the entire Panhandle down into the Big Bend region right along the coast. Our Georgia counties, east side of the Chattahoochee River, are included in that. Houston and Geneva counties are also included. That the areas that are in that dark blue color, that's the tropical storm warning. That's where we can expect there to be those strong tropical storm winds, anywhere between basically 40 miles per hour up to 73 miles per hour. So either way, that's a rough situation, because a severe thunderstorm warning is for a storm with essentially 55 mile per hour winds with it moving through. So, and this is usually a thunderstorm, pretty short-lived, maybe half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour at the most. This is going to be several hours, so you still have a concern with that. We have a lot of rain coming in, so trees will be falling, power lines will be falling, so it's just going to be a mess. And,
it will be.
And if you, I saw someone comment about the oak trees. Yeah, they're usually pretty strong, but when you have a whipping wind upwards of 100 miles per hour or more, doesn't take long before they start falling.
That's a lot of force behind it.
Yeah, I remember back in 2004 with Hurricane Charlie, when I was living on the west coast of Florida, there were pine trees inland where the storm was starting to weaken. It was a Category 4 when it made landfall. At this point, it was probably a Category 2 or 3 storm. There were pine trees, southern pine, just snapped like toothpicks.
That's not surprising.
And, and it could also be from one of those isolated spin-up tornadoes that is always a possibility with storms like this.
And I would like to point out that Pike and Barber counties were under a tropical storm watch earlier today. They have now been upgraded to a tropical storm warning. So everybody within our television market is currently under some kind of warning, whether that be a tropical storm warning or a hurricane warning. And then those extend all the way up into South Carolina, as you see there.
Yeah, middle Georgia, the coastal empire into the low country of South Carolina, all included in that. So if you have any kind of travel plans, you are going to want to cancel those out. And also even up into the Carolinas, where we do have a tropical storm watch.
All the way up into the Outer Banks.
Pretty at that point, a fairly weak storm. But they're going to be still dealing with the flooding conditions on top of what's already been happening from Florence still, as far as the recovery efforts with that storm. Let's see if we have anything. Enterprise, as far as Enterprise, Coffee County, you are included in that tropical storm watch. Ozark, Dale County, you are in the tropical storm warning. So likely weaker winds for you. Still a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. And like we've been talking about, I really think that the primary threat, or at least hazard, that we run into will be the power outages, because the winds are certainly sufficient to knock down trees and power lines. And it's all the more important to keep your phone charged, because the power is going to go out. It's just what's going to happen. And if that happens, we just want to make sure that you have a way to get warnings, because they're going to be continuously coming in, obviously, if we have tornado warnings, which is a possibility, and flash flood warnings.
Of course. Yeah, and let's see, will Enterprise roads be closed tomorrow? There will possibly be some closures. I don't know all the details on that, but pretend that they're closed. Don't go out.
Probably for the
best. Going from Elba to Enterprise, don't do it. Not a good idea. Tropicals, that can blow you off the road.
And I believe there's a threshold where emergency services will no longer come out to
where you're essentially where you're on your own. Especially if you are in an area that would be under a mandatory evacuation, like areas down by the coast. If you're under a mandatory evacuation, usually after that, they're not going to come in after you, because they told you to get out.
Yeah, and they have to look out for their own personal safety.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, you know, if they don't want to risk more lives being endangered by coming to save somebody who did not heed the warnings or the evacuation orders. Let's see, what else do we have here? The mobile home is not the place to be, Christy says. Yes, absolutely right. Like we talked about earlier, certainly want to find a local shelter, which we have a list of available on our website. There will be plenty of shelters that are open nearby because mobile homes, as you all know, are not fixed to the ground. They can be picked up and thrown very easily in events like this, particularly with tornadoes. And that's usually what we tell people is the best thing to do is to get out of it ahead of time.
Yeah, and try to find either a shelter or stay with a family friend or relative that might have a sturdier building.
Anything that has a site-built structure and a foundation.
Yeah, that's going to be your best bet, and that's also away from any flash flooding potential.
Yes.
At this point, we don't expect, we're going to dig into it a little bit later this evening as far as what we can expect for the rivers and streams. At this point, I don't see anything that says that we're going to have a major flooding issue. This storm is going to be too fast moving to dump too much rain, but we'll have updates on that later on this evening as we do head into certainly at the 9 o'clock hour. We'll be doing another update like this, and also on WDHN News at 10 o'clock. We'll have updates there, so we'll be bringing some more information on that, and also intermediate updates on DothanFirst.com. I see some questions about the timing. Let's go back to those graphics full screen for us with our computer model. That will give us an idea of when we can generally expect the winds to start to come into the area, along with the heavy rain with these storms. Right now, there we go. That's tomorrow morning at about 5:30. Possibly some steady winds here. Strong steady winds upwards of 25 miles per hour here in Dothan, and there we go, making landfall sometime after lunchtime. This particular model that we are showing is our more or less what we refer to as our in-house computer model. It's almost like a blend of some of the other computer models out there that give us a more or less an even keel as far as what to project would be expected.
And it's worth pointing out right there at 2:30 p.m., 43 miles per hour, that's tropical storm force. That's exactly what we're talking about.
That is, and that's enough
and those are with the outer bands of the storm. You see the center of the storm, that's still maybe 80, 90 miles away, farther south.
We can actually measure that out right here.
There you go.
100 miles
100
out.
miles.
So we're going to be dealing with that pretty early on. Before lunchtime, I wouldn't expect it, but certainly as the storm starts to creep a little bit closer, making landfall, and there's those winds
steadily increasing as the
creeping
center
up.
gets closer.
There we go, 74 miles per hour sustained. Now these wind speeds on the map are sustained winds. We certainly could be dealing with gusts much higher than that, upwards of 100 miles per hour, and sometimes those gusts and those isolated tornadoes can cause more damage than some of the more of the slightly. We're going with slightly weaker winds.
Yes. Overall, still very powerful winds, nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. And then even with that center of circulation, possibly tomorrow evening south of Albany, still dealing with near hurricane force winds, at least according to this, and that's not out of the realm of possibilities. I think this model has been handling things pretty well as far as the projections, and really time will tell us once it does make landfall. This just gives us an idea of what to expect, but really it's going to determine exactly where on the coast it does make landfall. If it does make landfall, say somewhere more toward Panama City, maybe even a little bit more to the west to Destin, there's less land for it to cross before it gets to us. We'll be dealing with a stronger storm. If it's more toward Apalachicola, toward Tallahassee, as it's all more to the east, possibly weaker system for us. So that would be a good scenario for us, but not a good scenario for the Tallahassee metro area.
Right. And you see even early Thursday morning, those are still tropical storm force winds that are happening right there in Dothan, 48 miles per hour, still very powerful, even as the storm, for the most part, exits the region up into south central Georgia. And
I see Brittany asking about how does this compare to Opal. Opal was actually a similar intensity when it made landfall. I think it was a borderline Cat 3, Cat 4 when it was in the Gulf of Mexico, but when it actually did come on shore to the west of Panama City, I was pretty young at the time, so my memory might be a little bit fuzzy, but I believe it was around Fort Walton Beach, and we did have damage here in Dothan. Ben grew up here, and he's talked about remembering it 30-some years later. about how bad the winds were. So this is pretty similar. It is going to have similar intensity. So this is something that we are going to have to take very seriously. And Jennifer, yeah, this is as close to as a direct hit as we can get as far as the center of circulation possibly coming into Houston County. So that's why another reason why we do need to take this seriously. And then that closer that center comes to us, the greater the likelihood is of having those hurricane force winds here for us.
And that's sometimes difficult to convey as a meteorologist. That's a common problem that you run into with hurricanes, is exactly how close you are to the storm center makes a world of difference in terms of the impacts that you see. And as we all know, forecast models tend to wobble a little
bit. And the storms wobble in opposite directions of those storms. Sometimes they bounce along the coast until they are able to get more or less pulled inland. Because that's also a thing that's kind of hard to convey as a meteorologist, is that storms don't actually move.
Yes, they propagate.
They propagate, which is redevelopment in the spot that the conditions are best. So in one moment it might be here along the coast, the next moment it might be here, and then it might go back here. So then that's why it kind of looks like it's wobbling around until it more or less pulls itself on shore.
Yeah, it's basically like a ripple moving down a stream. It's not necessarily one thing that's moving. It's just the impacts of it are just moved downstream with the wind. And I really think that most of these on the higher end of the scale, in terms of like the maximum impacts that we would see, we'll more than likely see 65 to 75 mile-per-hour winds sustained at their highest as they come through Geneva and Houston counties. And then as far as the rainfall totals go, we'll likely see 4 to 6 inches of rain, which is not even close to the ballpark of what Florence and Harvey did, and that's mostly because, and those are just the more popular storms.
Yeah, they're kind of like the benchmark as far as devastating flooding, and also Floyd is another one that I'm sure a lot of people in the Carolinas remember. Similar situation where came on shore as a very strong storm, almost stalled out over the Carolinas and caused flooding that does rival Florence. That's not what we are dealing with here, which is good news.
It's possible that we have flash flooding, of course,
but not the widespread. This is going to be primarily a wind event for us.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. So it's now 5:52 right now. We have to wrap things up and start getting ready for our 6 o'clock news. We encourage you to switch over to, I believe we're going to be live streaming our 6 o'clock news, or you can also tune in online as far as what we'll be seeing as far as closings across the area. There's been a lot of issues with people coming up from the coast as far as the heavy traffic, shortages on some gasoline sporadically, not a panic at this point, certainly. I don't want to cause any alarm there, but it just shows that this is a pretty serious storm coming into our area. And just to reiterate, the timing is going to be for the strongest part tomorrow afternoon, late afternoon, and through the evening hours of Thursday. That's when we do have the best chance of having hurricane force winds in our area. Now, as far as the exact timing on that and how strong conditions will be, it's all going to be determined by where it does make landfall and the timing of it. But we have a pretty good indication that that actual landfall will probably be somewhere around lunchtime for tomorrow afternoon, as it does make its way inland, almost traveling up 231 at times.
We've had storms that do that, where they essentially go right up a highway corridor. Gordon did something similar in Mississippi, where it went straight up the Highway 49 corridor. This could be very similar to that, absolutely.
Oh, and just one more thing. Any threat of severe weather through the night tonight or early morning?
I don't really
We're going to be dealing with mostly showers, just like what we were talking about during the 5 o'clock hour on what Action Radar is tracking. Let's go to that real quickly if we could, as far as what we're seeing right now. Just some light showers. There's heavier activity in middle Georgia, Hazelhurst along I-16. That's loosely associated with Michael, but most of the rain is still offshore. But you can see there's a pretty wide dry patch right in here. So will we be dealing with much tonight? Probably not, but you will start to notice the breeze begin to pick up.
Yeah, and we'll have to just wait until we get till tomorrow afternoon to really see more of those stronger outer bands of the storm start to come ashore, and they'll be coming from east to west, and those are the ones we'll have to be watching. And we'll have full coverage starting tomorrow morning. Starting
early in the morning, very early in the morning. So if you're up, chances are we'll
be up too.
And we'll be on. We'll try to go back in the comments and go back and address anything that we missed during the actual live stream coming up. So keep following this live stream with this little weather roundtable, as we like to call it here. So we'll be able to answer all of your questions, and certainly keep asking questions. We're here to keep you safe and keep you informed in situations like this.
Absolutely. Yep, we'll be available.
All right, we'll see you in just about 5 minutes for WDHN News at 6 o'clock.